Hey, it's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to another edition of Q&A with the Coach. Today, our friend Dark Collective sends in this question. He says, I recently watched your video where you discussed the UFC promoting strikers over grapplers. The part where you mentioned the concept of fighters being well-rounded mixed martial artists is what got me wondering a few things. Is it possible to overwhelm yourself with training too many arts? At what level of competency in MMA fundamentals like boxing, Muay Thai, BJJ, wrestling, etc. should someone consider trying things off the beaten path? He goes on to say, I understand that many fighters are always looking to enhance their talent by training different or obscure arts, in which they have some degree of success incorporating techniques. Some good examples I can think of would be John Jones using oblique kicks from Savat, or Kung Lee's scissor kicks and takedowns from Vovinam. Not sure if that's actually correct, but while a bad one would be Anderson Silva training Wing Chun with predictable results, I feel like I can take advantage of this due to living in Southern California and being able to find almost anything. Thank you for your time. All right. Dark Collective. Is it possible to become overwhelmed training too many arts? There is this common misconception about MMA, about mixed martial arts, about becoming a well-rounded fighter. And the misconception is that you need to spend several years in a boxing school working on the art of boxing. And you need to spend several separate years in a wrestling gym learning the art of wrestling, and you need to spend several years in a Muay Thai camp doing nothing but Muay Thai, and you need to spend several years in a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu academy doing nothing but Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And then somehow magically this synthesis will happen and you will be a complete fighter. And that's not how it works. How is it how it works, Ramsey? Well, let me tell you how it works. Watch a fight. Watch a mixed martial arts fight. Watch a UFC fight. Look very closely at what's happening there. They're moving around on their feet. They are punching. They are kicking. They are clinching. They are wrestling. They are fighting for position. They're hitting each other on the ground. They are manipulating each other's bodies in the wrong direction to try to make the other guy tap out. It's not a bunch of separate arts. It's one thing. It's called fighting. Now, all these separate arts, what are they? They're artificial separations of fighting. It's trying to distill fighting down into something else that isn't actually fighting. We're trying to take a piece of it. It's like taking a sugar beet, shredding it up, squeezing the juice out of it, turning that into sorghum, and then distilling that a little bit more, turning it into sticky brown molasses, and then distilling that down even more into sugar, brown sugar, and then white table sugar with everything taken out except the glucose. None of the phytochemicals, none of the vitamins, none of the minerals, none of the fiber, just the glucose, and that's it. And I see a lot of people confusing themselves by trying to distill fighting down into something that fighting isn't. Look at a boxing match for a moment. Watch a boxing match. How much clinch fighting happens in a boxing match? You might say none. There's no clinch fighting in a boxing match. It's against the rules. When the fighters clinch, the referee separates them. Okay, yes, good point. How often does that happen? Does the referee come in, separate them, say break, and then box and have them go at it again? Quite often. all the time. That's happened in almost every boxing match ever. Why? Because in a real fight, here's what happens. People who begin striking at each other will eventually make contact with the other person. And if that other person does not go down, now they're in close contact range. And because of our three basic instincts for fighting, move away from the danger, push the danger away from us, or grab and squeeze that danger very close to mitigate damage, number 3 happens all the time in real fighting. And so the boxers tie up. Sometimes they do it for strategic purposes. Sometimes they do it out of instinct, but it happens constantly. The boxers tie up. Because that's what a real fight is. Sometimes we're out here throwing shots from a distance, and sometimes we tie up because that's where we are, or that's where we put ourselves. You see this constantly in street fights. Watch any street fight video. Almost always, I'll tell you how 99% of them go. Two guys get mad at each other. They say angry words. Maybe there's a push. They start swinging their fists. As soon as one fist connects, boom. That fighter is filled with mortal fear, and so he follows his instinct to grab and hold tightly where the other guy cannot swing his arms and hurt him as badly. And then they usually end up in a goofy schoolyard bully headlock, tumble on the floor, and then hope their friends pull them apart and say, break it up, to give them a face-saving exit. That's what a street fight generally is. But look at the format. There are different ranges of combat in that fight. There's a stand-up phase. There's a striking phase. There's a clinching phase. There's a ground fighting phase. They go through all the basic phases of combat that you see in MMA, and those are completely untrained guys who don't know a lick about fighting. Take a look at a Muay Thai fight. What happens there? The clinch is allowed. The clinch is encouraged. The fighters fight out of the clinch. They fight in the clinch. But then what happens when one of those fighters is swept or tripped in the clinch, which happens quite a bit, or knocked down? Does the other guy tumble on the ground with him, trying to get on top and squish and control? No, because the rules don't allow it. So instead, the referee gets in between the fighters, signals for the down man to get back up, and then restarts the action from the feet, because the floor is lava in Muay Thai. But in real life, unless you're fighting over a volcano, the floor is not lava. I have a lot of new students who come into the gym, and I guess they expect a bunch of lessons in a bunch of different arts, and then an eventual synthesis through a slow and gradual process, perhaps hopefully a painless process, into learning the skill of mixed martial arts. And it's not really like that. I mean, at my gym, you can take a boxing class, you can take a Jiu Jitsu class, you can take a Muay Thai class, you can take the MMA class. And if you're interested in being a mixed martial artist, yes, you should take all of them. But the end result is you get in a fight, and then you really fight, and the floor is not lava. And when you grab the other guy, the referee doesn't pull you apart. And when you tumble on the ground, your friends don't pull you apart and say, break it up, guys, break it up, giving you a face-saving exit. The fight just continues, wherever it is. And that's not a bunch of different arts. That's one thing. It's a fight. Now, I've talked for 10 minutes about this, but what your question really reminded me of is the depth and breadth of a single art, like, let's say, boxing. I had some questions at the gym yesterday about hand fighting. I was sparring with one of my students, and I kept landing my right uppercut followed with a left hook on him. And of course, I'm just touching very lightly, pa 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 pa. But I was consistently getting these moves, and he asked me after class, like, how do you do that? Like, every time I try to throw my right uppercut, I just open myself up. I'm like, look, it's two things. It's the footwork, the position, and it's the hand fighting. It's the framing. And he was like, what does that even mean? I said, follow me to the speed bag. So he's like, the speed bag? What the heck does that have to do with uppercuts and framing and footwork? I'm like, everything. So I show him these speed bag patterns. Right? And he's like, I've never even seen that before. Of course you haven't, because, you know, it's an old-timey thing. Jack Dempsey talks about this very specific pattern. I'm going to make a video breaking this whole thing down, because it's beautiful, and very, very few people even teach these speed bag patterns anymore. I remember when I first saw The Punch Professor, one of my favorite boxing channels on YouTube. Go check him out. Go show him some love. Go subscribe. Right? It's awesome. Great stuff. And I watched one of his speed bag videos, and he's using this pattern, framing with the ridge of the hand and the back of the hand, and then throwing uppercuts exactly like Jack Dempsey taught in his book. And I was like, I've never seen anybody else do that in real life. And his video was titled something along the lines of old school boxing training, something like that. Old school bag work. And yeah, man, I left a comment like, this is exactly what Jack Dempsey taught. And he was like, I didn't even know that. It's just an old speed bag pattern that the old timers used to do. And yeah, man. So if you break it down slowly and show how this translates into hand fighting patterns and footwork patterns, you break it down slowly, it starts to look like a lot of other traditional martial arts, a lot of Chinese kung fu styles. You'll see movements like this in Baguazhang, Xinyi. You'll even see them in Wing Chun. Some of these movements can be found in Tai Chi Chuan. And when you slow them down, it looks kind of silly. Like, when would you ever have like an open hand, like hi-ya, knife hand in boxing? Except it's not a knife hand, it's a frame. It's a frame. And when you speed it up, it makes perfect sense. Suddenly it looks like boxing again. But you slow it down and it looks like you're doing some Chinese kung fu style, something very esoteric. And you might think, I've never seen that in boxing, except you totally have, you just didn't know what you were looking at. So when you really dig deep into something like boxing, you realize there is so much more there than just punching stuff. I mean, it is the art of positioning on your feet to strike, and that involves not just throwing punches and covering up. That involves all the levels of hand fighting and footwork and level changes and all these beautiful things that every serious martial art needs to address in order to win fights. And that might be confusing, and that might seem overwhelming when you dig really, really deep into one combat sport like that. I'm not going to say arts, but a combat sport. What does art mean? An art is being able to do something really well. As far as we define martial arts, we're not talking about arts and crafts. We're talking about an art as in being able to do something really well, as in the skill of fighting. Martial referring to fighting or warfare. Martial art literally means the skill of fighting, the ability to fight well. And so talking about a bunch of different martial arts, a lot of different abilities to fight well, it sounds kind of weird, because a fight, like I said before, is one thing. It's one thing that can happen in a lot of different positions. And it's really not that many different positions. If you break it down, there are some really basic ones. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is great because it's good at cataloging positions. It's great at cataloging positions. So if you have even a remedial understanding of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you will have a strong understanding of most of the basic positions of a fight on the ground at that level of combat. when you bring the fight up to the feet, the positions become much more dynamic. On the ground, they're much more static, meaning you can hold them for a lot longer. You can get stuck there a lot longer. Whereas again, if you're hand fighting and trapping, you're there for that long, and then suddenly it's a different position. And if you try to lock a fight into a hand-fighting battle, you're going to get beaten up pretty badly. Because again, it's just like that quick. And that's why a lot of these traditional, esoteric styles or Chinese Kung Fu styles, a lot of practitioners of those styles get frustrated because they want to see their style in a fight. They want to visually see it. And the reality is, this big emphasis, like, say, Wing Chun. Wing Chun's very well known for hand fighting and trapping. And they will spend an inordinate amount of time on hand fighting and trapping. And they will stand in front of each other, and they'll lock hands, and they'll move around, and they'll stick, and they'll frame, and they'll do all this stuff. And that's like, for a lot of people, not all, but a lot, that can be like 90% of their training. But then if you look at how much of that hand fighting and trapping actually happens in a fight, it happens here, happens there, boom, boom, super quick, so quick you don't even notice it. The hands connect, we make a frame, we push, we strike, the frame's gone, there's a reset, there's space in between you, and if you don't know how to box and kickbox at that range, once again, you're screwed. So if you're trying to do a hand-fighting battle in a position where the guy's not there to hand-fight with, then you're screwed. Similarly to how if you were trying to hit somebody with a spinning hook kick, but you're pinned on your back, you're screwed because you're in the wrong position for that particular activity. So what do you actually have to learn to be a good fighter? If I were to break down the most fundamental skills for the sport of MMA, which should be practiced as its own unique sport, in as much as boxing is practiced as its own unique sport. Notice boxers don't feel like, well, today I need to go to the Wing Chun school to learn some hand fighting and trapping, then I need to go to the Bagua school to learn some circular footwork to go along with that hand fighting and trapping, and then I need to go over to the wrestling school to learn, how to mitigate the clinch or engage in a clinch for that very brief strategic advantage when I possibly might need to tie up. And then I need to go over to a karate school to learn some contrast in my punches, just to get some different ideas and abstractions or whatever. No, they just go to a boxing school and they learn the sport of boxing. Now, once in a while, you'll have guys like Muhammad Ali. He trained with some karate guys and some taekwondo guys because he wanted to learn different things about punching, and that's fine. But at the same time, he understood boxing is its own unique sport, so you need to train specifically for the sport of boxing. So what do you need to do for MMA? Well, you need to know how to punch, you need to know how to kick, you need to know how to clinch, you need to know how to move around on your feet in two positions that allow you to punch and kick and knee and elbow and otherwise hit and hurt the other guy. You need to know how to wrestle. And wrestling isn't a specific style. That means you need to know how to move your body relative to another human body that's trying to control you. You need to know how to frame, how to hand fight, how to arm drag, how to duck under, how to shoot, to get your shoulder to the hip. You need to know how to sprawl. You need to know how to sit out. You need to know how to finish takedowns, how to pin and control your opponent, how to get off your back when you're on the bottom, how to get back up on your feet if you're down. You need to know how to use grappling offensively and defensively, how to break the joints of the body, how to strangle the neck in various positions. In every offensive position, you need to understand how to attack from that position. In every defensive position, you need to learn how to defend in those positions. That might seem like a whole lot of different things. You might think, well, in this particular martial art, they they do teach, that one thing where you're on your back and then you stick your leg here and your hand there, and therefore what you're saying is I need to become a black belt in that style before I can move on to technique number 2. No! No, man. Just because a bunch of different martial arts with a bunch of different names and uniforms or whatever share different techniques doesn't mean that you need to go out there and train with all of these schools, man. Learn the art of fighting. It's not that complicated. We can try to complicate it a great deal, but it's not that complicated. It's not a million different things. It's one thing. It's a fight. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and train.